Everyone can chat. Attendee can chat with everyone. Okay, chat box is now undisabled. If you'd like to type in the chat box where you are located, thank you very much. So we got Maine, we got Nevada. Somebody's not hearing us. I think the others are, so it's probably with your system. Sometimes going out and coming back in helps. Otherwise, check your audio system. We got Hawaii, wow. West Virginia, New York, Kentucky, India. So we're all over the world. Nevada, Maine. Wow, quite a few. Thank you guys for coming. Virginia. So we have quite a few. India, I know a lot of countries are trying to, third world countries are trying to get black soldier flies going as a local protein source too. Okay, it's 3:02, so we'll get started. My name is Dr. Jackie Jacob. I am at the University of Kentucky, where I am the only poultry specialist at the moment because our recruiting didn't work. We haven't replaced my boss yet. So as part of my job, I do these monthly webinars. We're getting close to the end of the year, and Dr. Fanatico from Appalachian College, right? Is it Appalachian University?
Appalachian State University.
Okay. Is going to finish us off with the last 2 months. So this one will be on black soldier fly larvae, and then choice feeding, which is another specialty of hers, will be in December. I'm working on the topics for 2026. So if you have any brilliant ideas, please let me know. I have a few speakers lined up, but I have lots of months to fill. Once Dr. Fanatico gets going, I will monitor the chat and Q&A box. If a question is something that clarifies what she's talking about at that particular moment, then I will interrupt. So you won't see me or hear me. If my picture pops up, that means I'm interrupting her to ask that question for clarification. Otherwise, all questions will be left to the end. But if you're like me and can't remember, if you don't type it right away, you forget it, feel free to put your question in the chat box or the Q&A, and I will make sure that the questions get answered before the end of the class. While she's doing her presentation, I will put our website, our Facebook page, and links to past recordings and future classes. So as I said, our only speaker today, is Dr. Ann Fanatico at Appalachian State College, who is an expert in alternative and sustainable feeding practices for poultry. So as I said, I will be muted with my video off unless I need to clarify something. So if you want to add anything more about yourself, Dr. Fanatico, please feel free to do so.
Great.
And this is being recorded, I hope. It's supposed to be. What does it say? Yes, it is being recorded and will be available for later access. So all yours.
Thanks, Jackie. And I'm excited to talk to y'all about black soldier fly production. I imagine some of you are producing black soldier flies or very interested, may well know a lot more than I do or what I talk about today. I do teach at Appalachian State University. I teach sustainable agriculture, agroecology. My area of research is ecological poultry production, and I'm very interested in feeds for sustainability. I'm going to share my screen, and my contact information is at the end of this presentation. But and I did actually give a presentation in about 5 or 6 years ago 2019, I think, with Jackie, and I'll refer some to that presentation on black soldier fly. But what I'd really like to talk about today is a community level approach. So this is a different view that Jackie and I gave in 2019. I do teach in the Sustainable Development Department at App State. We're located in uh, Western North Carolina in the mountains. Some of the benefits of black soldier fly, their Hermetia illucens, I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with that it is native to the neotropics, to the New World. We often say it's native to the Southeast US, but it's native all over the neotropics, pretty much between 40 latitude north and south. But it is worldwide now. This is an image from ResearchGate. I think all of my images are original pictures that I took, except where I note online, because I just want you to know where some of the information and some of the images come from. So all over the world, people are producing black soldier fly, mainly to manage organic waste. This is the real reason to raise black soldier fly. For composting, but it's different than composting with microbes. It also converts food waste, and we know that organic waste in a landfill creates methane. It's a problem. So it's important to be able to manage our waste, and when we produce things and turn it into a resource if possible. And here is a real resource. Black soldier fly do produce a very high quality livestock feed. And many of us do happen to be interested in alternative feeds for poultry. We know that poultry have a high protein requirement, and black soldier fly do have the potential to replace fish meal, which is a real sustainability point since fish are being overfished in many parts of the world. But the main thing is that it's a circular regenerative practice. Composting, converting food waste with black soldier fly, because it means nutrient cycling on a local level, and it is a real ecosystem service. I pulled this photo here with the photo credit from online from Purdue University, because I really like how it shows the size of the black soldier fly larvae as they go through their 5 instars, and then when they start to turn into the pre-pupae, which is what you watch for, because you want to harvest the black soldier fly. If it's for poultry feed, you want to harvest them before they turn into the pre-pupae. So just a little bit of background. Again, things that y'all may well know is that it is a way to bioconvert organic waste into high quality larvae, and the larvae do not bite, sting, or cause a nuisance. But when you're raising black soldier fly, you are working with a lot of materials, and you have to be careful not to attract rodents or pests. They do have a rapid life cycle that fortunately can be adjusted. And so you can fit black soldier fly into your life one way or another if you haven't done it yet. Again, I pulled this from the internet from Purdue Extension with the authors or with the photo credit. And I love the way it shows what the eggs look like and a relative size of these 5 instars that the larvae go through before they turn into pupa and undergo metamorphosis into adults. So that's a really nice image online. I have gotten a lot of material from research that's been done in the past, and I'll refer to some of the citations at the end. And one of the citations that I use is that there's a 75% reduction of waste, of organic waste. So it's very substantial how we can um, not send organic waste to the landfill where it will produce methane. It's very impactful to reduce the waste. And it's about a 5-to-1 feed conversion ratio. Many of us that work with chickens or livestock are looking to see what the feed conversion is going to be. It might seem that it's not a great feed conversion. As we know, poultry is more like 2 to 1. Uh, but this is conversion to biomass, and then you still have you have the frass left over. So I apologize for using the English system. This is what many of us, of course, in the U.S. are used to using pounds, and I'm sorry to our international participants, but I am trying to also make sure this is useful for folks that are thinking in pounds. 100 pounds of waste can yield 20 pounds of biomass, and that also includes 5 pounds of frass of the feces. Some of the research and businesses on a large scale in the U.S. have included work at College Station at Texas A&M, and years ago, realizing that the black soldier fly actually um, grow in poultry operations. They could grow under cages. They could they could grow, and they can reduce the manure. And so there's been interest over time, and businesses developed. These are two companies, my understanding, based in Texas, and Simpton is one of the ones I refer to for supplies and materials. But these are companies and research that developed often with a large scale focus. Um, EnviroFlight in the US, my understanding is in Terra, still in Canada, and this is for the European Union. Of course, there's many more around the world, large scale. EnviroFlight actually has a North Carolina office now, so I believe started in Kentucky and expanding, so that's always exciting to hear. So there is a real interest on a large scale too. My interest is mainly with developing countries. I work in the sustainable development department, and I like learning about large scale production in different countries. And this is one that video and materials that came out in 2017 that I still refer to from Indonesia. It is, I think it's a Swiss development agency. I like looking at, what these trays look like. This of course is tropical production. In the most of the United States, we have to worry quite a bit about how to produce in the wintertime. And so we can't do open trays like this in an open shed all of the year. We're going to have to cover, protect our larvae and adults. And I also like to cover the trays because I'm just really intent on not attracting varmints. But this is the website for this, to me, a fascinating work that's been done in Indonesia. At App State, we did work with black soldier fly several years ago, just before the pandemic, trying to
And
develop.
can you go back to the previous slide so I can see the website, and I will post it in the chat. Thanks.
Yeah. So we tried raising farm scale black soldier fly systems before the pandemic. And again, we did a small backyard flock webinar with Dr. Jacob, and that's online. We can link to that at some point. And it does include our previous work, a description of outdoor systems in our university garden. It's our campus garden for summer, and also just a very preliminary feeding trial. No replications, just a feeding trial at our university farm with black soldier fly and day-old chicks. So that is summarized in that previous webinar. And then we stopped doing black soldier flies for a while, but there was a student in our sustainable tech department at our university that used our equipment in a dedicated greenhouse for her thesis. And this is her at work. Hyla is the student, and she's given a talk about using the large protopod in pretty much of a continuous type system. We'll talk about batch versus continuous, but I think she was really fortunate to have access to this incredible greenhouse to work in. So we no longer, we don't have access to that. It belonged to another department. We use the protopod just outside because we don't have big greenhouse facilities on campus. At the university farm, there are some larger greenhouses. This is at the university farm is where I raised my chickens did feeding trials in a pasture poultry research facility, and it's about 16 miles from campus. And you can see I use these small huts as the way I raise chickens and give them some more outdoor access with fences also. But we did restart our Black Soldier Fly research last year with a convergent science project called STEPS. That it's actually a center based in North Carolina at NC State, and it's a project that focuses on phosphorus cycling. So we're trying to look more closely at nutrient cycling. Um, we got started last year, but we were slowed down quite a bit by Hurricane Helene that hit about this time last year, and it did hit the mountains of North Carolina. And many farmers are still recovering in our area. So, including our county and several counties to the west near Asheville. And actually, a really major black soldier fly producer, Danny's Dumpsters, Danny Keaton, he said, checked with him a few months ago, and he said he just didn't have help these days because the hurricane just hit so hard. So I hope he's back in production soon. I've got a few pictures of Danny's operation. But our 2025 objectives have been to develop community level, I'm sorry about the typo here, but community level production systems, really looking beyond our households or looking beyond our farms to a community perspective. That's what I'm trying to offer here. Something kind of in between the very small scale and the very large scale. Plus year-round production in a cold climate, not just rearing the larvae, but also how to maintain a colony. As I've mentioned, black soldier fly are very adaptable and resilient, and so that helps. And we can use whatever resources we have available, meeting local needs with local resources. So we're trying to develop local feedstuffs. We're also working on our harvesting and processing systems and turning the product into poultry feeds. And engaging community is important for us in local food systems. And this image does show a student I've been working with. We have undergrads. We don't have graduate students in our department. And undergrads have offered a wonderful perspective to our program. This is Justice with some of the larvae that he raised. When you look at batch versus continuous, batch is a more efficient and productive way to actually manage the life cycle of black soldier fly. Continuous is generally going to be take less management. It's not quite as productive, but it's what many people do. There's many very interesting designs of continuous production, but we're going to talk more about batch production, starting with eggs and with the goal of harvesting the larvae. So you do, of course, have to get your hands on some eggs, and we'll talk more about that. But the eggs do need to be usually going to incubate about 5 days. And so I find you need controlled conditions to do this. Here, I just try to do it inside in the lab. So about 5 days, and then the neonates are going to hatch out and feed them for about 5 days and until they're visible for counting. I haven't actually started counting larvae yet, but apparently just counting the number in a sample and then extrapolating. But I think to be efficient, we probably do want to count, how many larvae we're putting into a tray if we're rearing them. So you rear the larvae, usually I find usually about at least 4 weeks, but you can do it more quickly. Actually 2 to 3 weeks at least is what I've written here. Stop feeding and harvest them before they turn into pupae, to pre-pupae, and retain about 1% if you're doing colony production. So this takes us to the harvest of the larvae. With the eggs, we've been ordering from Flukers, and it is about $100 for 5 grams. Had really good luck. I think they Louisiana-based company and they ship the eggs, these little containers, and they come with a little warmer inside the envelope, and they say you can leave them in here and they'll hatch, at 5 days. As soon as we receive them, and they are sent overnight, you do have to pay more, for the overnight. Um, we put them on a screen, and you can see we have a little wire frame here and something yummy for them to start eating. Cornmeal, is a good way to start them. You definitely want some small feed particles. So we put them on the screen. That this is something that Danny Keaton showed me how to do, and they just fall through, often called the hatchling shower. And grow them inside. They're not going to attract a bunch of pest inside, just a small amount. Grow them inside for 5 days. And with 5 grams, you should have about 400,000 eggs. Sorry, I swallowed wrong. In terms of rearing larvae, read this while I recover. I'm sorry about that. I just swallowed wrong. These are two students, Isabella, that we work with, and also Justice, App State students. The ideal temperature for rearing them is listed in Fahrenheit. You want to avoid temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And I think this is about avoiding 25 Celsius for international folks. You do also want some amount of relative humidity and the moist substrate can help. So you can use things like coir, the coconut coir. You can also use wheat bran, coffee grounds. These are ways to help maintain a little bit of humidity so the larvae don't dry out. Plus, their feed is also going to be about 75% water. Again, I use lids on my trays, and you can see I'm just using like a 10-gallon tote here. I use lids because we're raising these outside, and I just don't want to, this is our campus garden, I don't want to attract any varmints. We do have skunks in the area and different varmints. I also put a screen because they need ventilation. So this is how we are raising our blacks. We've got a pumpkin in here for Halloween, but this is generally how we raise our larvae in trays. And it makes sense to go ahead and stack them, whether they're inside or outside. And you can see we're using our compost shed here. We're growing them. This is a shaded, a covered area, so we don't have rain falling in. So you do need some type of place to protect your trays from the elements, from rain, from sun. You generally going to want to do black soldier fly in the shade as much as possible, unless you're starting to move into fly production. That's where you, in your colony, where you want some sunlight. But you can see that we have a covered, well-shaded area. You do stack to be able to provide airspace. The Rubbermaid 10-gallon totes that we work with, these are the dimensions, and I apologize that it's not in centimeters, but I wanted y'all to see they're 12 by 8, and they're about 9 inches deep. That you don't need quite that amount of depth, but this is just these things only cost about $15, so they're pretty inexpensive to work with. And then I not only put lids on them, I also surround the whole thing when we're outside with some type of protection, because I really just don't want critters. I don't want to attract, and people that raise chickens, you don't want open house, you don't want to bring in a lot of varmints. I've calculated at 35-day-old larvae per square inch to put 6,500 neonates into this size tray. I'm calculating based on the square area, not cubic, but just square, because you don't want to go too deep. Usually a substrate and feed of about 3 inches or less is best, so you're not actually smothering the larvae. Uh, again, wheat bran, coffee grounds can help provide some feed and also retain moisture. In cold weather, you have to move these inside. You really, if you're going below 50 degrees, then they're just not going to be very active. They're going to, try to conserve energy, and you want to use them efficiently. That's why we're doing them in batches. So our greenhouse happens to be heated with solar, but it's not a passive solar. This is actually an active solar. It has evacuated tubes on top of the greenhouse, and then the heat in the wintertime is transferred to this tank of water. So that's how, I mean, we can be off the grid if we wanted to, but we are using the grid for a heat mat also. So this is just an example of how we can keep producing larvae in the wintertime. And there might be other ways to do it. This is one thing that Danny Keaton was working on several years ago, like a box that perhaps even in the ground, but a box that you could keep the larvae from freezing. But you want to do more than keep them from freezing. You want them to be active, so you are looking for 50 degrees or more. You feed about every 3 to 4 days, so you're doing basically skip a day or skip several day feeding. With this amount of larvae in that size tray, it's about 21 pounds of food. So of course about 10 pounds or 10 kilos. And this is 75% water. So we're not talking about dry matter here. It'd of course be much less on a dry matter basis, but you do want to keep it well hydrated. In fact, the larvae can almost kind of suck in liquid feed apparently. Um, and so you spread out the feeding over several days. And the videos that I've watched in the tropics, they're harvesting larvae at about 12 days. And so they have 3 days of feeding, and then they harvest after 12 days. I can't quite manage. I can't manage that quickly. Our nights, we're in the mountains, so we do get nights even in the summer, down to 50 degrees, and much of the country does. And this is information from the the Swiss publication of the work in Indonesia, that 10,000 larvae will eat 33 pounds of feed on a wet basis. The skip-a-day feeding prevents them from smothering, from having too much feed, and it's good because other pests are not going to be attracted because the black soldier fly are keeping up with things. So we're working outside, and we're not using high-level scales outside. We're working in our little small greenhouse. So we're just working with this type of scale. This 2025, we worked with what we had. We happened to have some kernels of sunflowers and peas and oats, but we didn't have high production because, well, you really kind of need to soak these or grind them because they don't really have chewing mouth parts. They loved our fallen pears. We lost some pears off of our trees in the garden. Tomatoes, they don't really bite through the tomatoes. You have to kind of stir it up for them. But seasonally, we're going to be looking at using ground corn from that we grow, cold potatoes, some of our dry clover, our other cover crops. Pumpkin pulp is kind of seasonal this time of year. There's a lot of fallen apples in our area that are not used for anything, and so I'll plan to glean fallen apples. And then, of course, at a university, there was always going to be cafeteria food waste that's of interest. So in terms of feed handling, it really is going to help to grind your feed. This is one way to do it, just like with a drill attachment. And this is what I saw Danny Keaton do, that, probably about 3 or 5 pounds of feed that was added to, he used this size bin, like a kiddie swimming pool. Um, You need to make sure you're storing your feeds in a way that doesn't attract varmints because this is, handling a lot of materials. Um, I don't have a root cellar, but we can use something electronic here, just a wine cooler, or you might be using large covered bins to store feed with some type of screening just to keep pests away. And feed particle size should be small. Um, and ways to process the feed include grinding, soaking, and I saw fermenting in Costa Rica at this spring at the insect museum at the University of Costa Rica. They're actually doing some fermenting for their black soldier fly. So you want to harvest the larvae before they turn into prepupa, and you stop feeding. There's no reason to feed because they're starting to actually eat less, and then their mouth parts turn into a hook because what they try to do is crawl away from the feed to a warm, dry, sheltered area to pupate. And that's when the larval color is going to turn dark brown. And it's a higher chitin content, and that's going to be harder for chickens to digest. So harvest before 40% become prepupae. And then that does mean separating the prepupae from the and larvae from the substrate, because the substrate that you're going to have is, well, some frass, and then you might still have a little bit of core in there or coffee grounds, whatever you've been using to make sure the larvae don't dry out. If you have a fairly dry substrate, you should be able to use about um, a 3 millimeter screen or 1/8 screen just to manually shake them, separate them, the larvae from the substrate. This is an image of Danny Keaton using something automated that he developed. Um, my understanding is that you can go to a smaller screen, like 3 millimeters. I'm sorry, you can use a slightly larger screen, about 5 millimeters, if it's automated. But this shakes and then he's blowing away some material and funneling his larvae. So he was doing things at a pretty large scale. The way I'm planning to do more larvae separation is the method that if you look at the Indonesia video that I'll show in the resources, they have a wet substrate, so they're just dumping their substrate onto a 1/8 inch screen, and then they don't do anything. They just let the larvae and the water drip down. They're not, I think they do actually catch the water here. I'm just hoping to get the larvae, collected here. And then you do need to do an additional rinse. And this file folder happened to be 1/8 screen, so I use that to do a final rinse. And then you do need to terminate and dehydrate the larvae. So you can terminate them with boiling water, immersing them for 1 minute. They should die instantly in the boiling water. This is what ours look like after we rinse them and boiled them. So it is a good heat treatment. And then dehydrating, we actually use a solar dehydrator. You can't see the whole dehydrator in this image, but you can see it a lot better in the 2019 webinar that I did. But these students are spreading out the larvae onto screens, and they dehydrate and lose about half of their weight. Um, for using as a poultry feed, you probably do want to be doing some processing and even grinding. So it's a high quality livestock feed, high in protein, oil, and calcium. Um, you can grind it, and you can also vacuum seal or somehow remove the oxygen and make some type of product. This is the chicken trail mix that our students named it that because it's not actually ground. It's the whole dehydrated larvae with a little bit of pumpkin seed mixed in because we were feeding some pumpkin pulp and I think even a few field peas mixed in. So it is high in oil, so rancidity can soon occur. Another value-added step would be pressing out the oil and using the oil as a biofuel. y'all probably know in the U.S. poultry feed regulations in 2018, it was recommended to the Association of American Feed Control Officials to include black soldier fly larvae for a poultry feed, and it does require feed grade substrates. So that's where residues can really come into play. I'd like to talk just a few minutes about colony production, because what you're doing with the colony is you are retaining about 1% of the larvae, and you're allowing them to uh, the pupa to turn into adults. The adults they live about 7 days, and so once they have laid, you need pretty much a screen cage to do this, and I'll show some images of what we're trying to use. Incubate the eggs for 5 days, just like I showed before with rearing larvae. They're going to hatch, and then distribute the larvae into trays. But it's the same type of as raising larvae, but you can see it's circular here. You want to allow the prepupa to develop into pupa and produce the eggs. So rearing them, you would save your 1%, and I'm intending to keep my 1% inside, raise them on the Gainesville diet. I think you could also, some people raise them on chicken feed. I'll show you what the Gainesville diet is in a few minutes, but collect them once they migrate. And I've shown some protopod images, of these plastic types of products that we can buy in the US, the very large ones. This is a smaller one that has the ramp installed because, they're moving away. I've had more luck with other ramps than this ramp, but I'm hopeful that this ramp will work well. But when these larvae turn into prepupa and they start migrating, that's when you want to collect them and allow them to pupate, and they might take up to 2 weeks to pupate. So the reason for keeping them in the dark is so when they emerge, and this is I'm citing the Swiss information here about the Indonesia production, that the males will emerge first, and you want to keep them inactive, so they'll wait for the females to emerge and discourage activity until they've both emerged, and then release them to a lighted screen cage. So I'm actually going to just put them in my lab, and if I need a heat mat, I'll use a heat mat. But just allowing them, a nice place, a little bit of coconut core around them. The Gainesville diet is about 50% wheat bran, and this is the citation, about 20% cornmeal and about 30% alfalfa meal. So these are images of the experiments, or trying out different materials that we're using. You want to release the flies to a well-lit, screened cage. And again, I'm trying to just work outside because I think a lot of us are working in sheds or barns. Apparently mating can take up to 30 minutes. So you don't want to interrupt the mating. And when the females are ready to lay, they will back their abdomen into these sheltered areas. This is just corrugated cardboard, and you can see a little bit of cardboard laying here in several layers. In the wintertime, you can't really have a cage like that outside because the temperature that you're going to need is quite a bit higher, for them to mate. So this is an image that I got online of the symptom, screen cages. I've read that 1 meter squared is a good size, but I'm just not able to buy something like that online. I'll show you what I'm planning to buy. I mean, I've experimented with using mosquito net in different sizes, but you can also place a little mini greenhouse in your greenhouse. And of course, if you're trying to do flies or larvae inside your greenhouse, you would have to make sure you're not violating any of the GAP, the good agricultural practices in terms of food safety. But I do think there's ways to do it. So this is a little mini greenhouse that if you look at some of the Purdue extension videos, it shows a little greenhouse inside of their greenhouse. I've tried to put my mosquito net inside our greenhouse. It's just not going to be warm enough. I've given it a try here. I think you'd have to move into a greenhouse that's warmer, or a lab, or a garage. So a lot of ways to do this, but you're going to need about 77, a temperature of about 77, to 86 required for breeding, according to this citation. So that's why I'm going to be putting something like this inside. And I've listed where you can get this equipment. You also need abundant light. This is the Black Soldier Fly light that is offered by Symptom. And I think this is what the recommendation is for 14 hours of light. If you're working in a greenhouse, you'll probably be doing what your plants need. But, this is the type of lighting that's used. That is a 150-watt light lamp. So, to be efficient, you want to start measuring your productivity. And we're working with students here. We just put the larvae in the freezer for about 2 minutes so we could start measuring them. I think you could also just stun them with some alcohol. There's some ways that you can stun them. But we're, starting to try to measure our larval weight and the amount of feed that we're giving them, measuring their performance on different types of local feeds. And, we're also just trying to measure how much weight loss we get when we put them into the dehydrator. So this is our data for putting them into a dehydrator. The goals for colony, according to the Dortmund citation, is about 70% hatch. And then with the neonates to pupa, you want to see at least a 70% survival of your larvae. You want to see at least 80% emerge as flies. And then you want your females to lay about 350 eggs each. So they've got some great ways for laying this. And if you don't interrupt the mating, then your eggs should be fertile, because it would be disappointing to do all this and get eggs and them not be fertile. So apparently you just need to make sure you're not interrupting the mating process. We're giving a community perspective to our insect production. I do think that there's potential for extension offices, or for enterprising growers, or for universities to have do some local egg production, trying to determine if local farmers are interested. Include some training, include some equipment, material rental or loaning, and share these neonates in early spring. When we're trying to do local food systems, we are trying to build community. So that's, to me, it's one way to do that. There are just many continuous designs possible. You could be sharing these eggs in a community to provide, kind of seed the pile, or, as young larvae, just to grow them out and provide eggs on a regular basis all during the year. This is what we've set up in the past for continuous production. This is the large protopod that we've used. And of course, this, when they crawl up the ramp and then they fall into the bucket here, we put a cover over that, because we're doing entirely outdoor production. Here's our compost right back here. Here's our food tower, where we ask people to put food scraps, and we do get wild black soldier flies show up, in this, because they are attracted to the compost. And I wish we could depend on our wild populations, but they don't show up, until later in the spring, and it just takes a while for them to produce. So that's why we're trying to give people a head start. Continuous production is less productive, but less management needed. The larvae are different ages. You're depending more on self-harvest and also on the wild populations. But I think, eggs are needed locally, because I would like to do local insect production for local organic waste reduction and local chicken feed. So I think it's important to look at what we can do. Um, Again, I've referred to some Purdue materials, and I really loved that this researcher said there's just great power in the tiny larvae, and I agree with that. In 2025, we've lent protopods to local farmers and born again dirt bad composting. They're using our protopods right now. So I think it's exciting to share this equipment because you don't want to have to buy this equipment and not like it. So I think it makes sense to share it. This is a link. I think Jackie's going to give us an update to the webinar we did in 2019. This is some of the Purdue information that I've referred to online. This is some Texas research. And then here's the link for I find it very interesting, production in Indonesia and summarized by a Swiss development agency. Here are some resources for Fluker Farms, and here's for the protopod. They've got some nice manuals, that they share. My email, and this is how we funded this work, 2024, 2025. This is a convergent science project. I'm going to stop sharing and see what kind of questions y'all might have.
Haven't got any questions yet. I have been, here's one. I have been posting some of the links that you put up into the chat box for them to get it. Why is it that black soldier fly don't transfer pathogens such as in dog poop and research in that area?
My understanding is that they just have like a natural kind of antibiotics that reduce pathogens, which was wonderful, if that's actually what's happening. Um, I'm not using manure with what I'm doing right now, but yes, there's definitely research that's really, to me, full circle nutrient cycling to use any type of manure.
I know that when it was originally started, it was to use waste material, especially in developing countries. But in the US, when they approved it, you couldn't use manure, right?
Right.
It had to be non-manure type
Hmm.
products. But, India, Jamaica, all the different countries are actually looking at it as a method of controlling um, waste products, which can, human waste products even, which can be um, a problem for pathogen transformation. So there is a lot of research on it. So um, it's a big topic you could go on for hours about. What are the pros and cons of harvesting live larvae and giving them to the poultry?
I think that would be wonderful welfare for the chickens. They would love it. Um, just sometimes you are trying to grow for the season, and so you want to preserve the larvae. But if you have the ability to feed the larvae live, it's used in aquaculture also, and the chickens will love you. Um, I think if you're feeding chickens, you want to spread it out so they all get some, and not just the most aggressive birds. Make sure that everybody gets some live larvae.
Originally, when they started the whole movement for black soldier fly, wasn't it the self-harvesting?
Hmm.
But that depends on having a very strong local black soldier fly population that is restocking. Whereas if you have to grow your own to harvest the eggs to grow more, then that sort of defeats the whole purpose,
Yeah, we're trying to kind of take control of the life cycle.
right? Any of the companies that do it, you know, that's they have to control that thing. Is it lucrative enough for a farm to dedicate an agricultural building to it?
I would
It
say,
depends on your term of lucrative.
yeah, it depends on the market. And I would say that you can do a lot of this outside. And so you can use a shed, but you have to have pretty good control to make sure you're not attracting varmints. But um, I did show a little bit more, I think, of Danny Keaton's operation, in the previous video. And he, I mean, people that are doing it large scale, yes, they're definitely dedicating an agricultural building to it. I was looking more at a community scale, but I guess, if you're going to dedicate an agricultural building, you might really be scaling up if you're going to do
And
that.
I mean, there are commercial companies, and that's what they do. They dedicate buildings specifically to it, like the Environ Flight. I think they began here in Kentucky, and they have to contain everything for various reasons, food safety being one of the major things. Um, and they also don't feed live. They harvest the larva and then defat it and all that kind of stuff to produce a product for sale. So depends on your purpose, right?
Mhm. I think the market is going to grow. It encourages me that, some of the big poultry producers, are interested. And there's a lot of research now on feeding black soldier fly larvae.
It's becoming very popular in Europe, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
A lot of insect, not just black soldier fly larvae, for sustainable ag production. Have you heard of harvesting heat from the BDF production? I heard they generate about 90 degrees of warmth. Could it become self-sustaining in heat if that was well insulated?
Well, I think there's potential there. People do that, of course, with harvesting compost heat from microbes. So I think it's absolutely possible to do it with black soldier fly. I happen to be at a university that has an amazing sustainable technology department. They're called Sustainable Building and Technology, STBE. And if you look at their Nexus, NEXUS, if you look at their Nexus resources, they show how to do things like, I mean, they built their little greenhouses next to our landfill in our town. And I was talking to them one time because, they do active solar collection. And so sometimes their evacuated tubes will actually, instead of feeding into a water tank, they'll feed into root zone heating for plants. So I was thinking, oh, I could really use that for worms too, for black soldier fly. And they said, okay, or just use a heat mat. So that's why I've started with a heat mat, but absolutely, there's potential for what that question proposed.
And then similar questions, cost of production per pound and amount of money you can save supplementing feed for poultry. But you're talking more about replacing things like fish meal and stuff that are not necessarily sustainable and making it more sustainable.
Yeah, I am
Uh,
talking about increasing sustainability, increasing the robustness, of some of our local food systems. So, I mean, it takes a lot of effort, I'd say, to do what we're doing, but it is all for the future of reducing the cost of production, increasing the robustness of our poultry production. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely potential to save money by supplementing. And I think that's what Jackie mentioned. The companies look at this because it might be more sustainable than soybeans at some point. It might be more, well, it won't replace soybeans, but it could replace fish meal. So there's a lot of trade-offs there. Right now, what I'm doing, I can't say that I do need to calculate the cost of production, and it's still, insect meal is extremely expensive in the US to be able to use. But that's why we should all be doing it locally, doing our own.
yeah, labor intensive, but you know, it's more of a sustainability issue. And you're not actually supplementing to a complete feed. You're using it as a protein source in a complete feed
And
situation,
that's what we'll talk about at our next one, Jackie. We'll talk about
the
how
choice
to,
feeding.
yeah.
And somebody asked me to remind you of the choice feeding. Do you remember what? I can't find my schedule. I probably I can do it on my phone computer. It's faster. It's the first Tuesday of December, so it is December 2nd. Anne will be back again talking about choice feeding and how you can incorporate such different alternative feed ingredients into a complete feed with poultry in a sustainable way. Any other questions before we close down? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Anne. Very informative. I learned a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing how that, gets involved into the choice feeding system where you're using a lot of different ingredients in order to maximize productivity from alternative ingredients. I really like it.
Thanks, y'all, for attending, and thank you so much, Shaggy, for inviting me.
Okay, so again, if you, yes, the recording will be available probably later tonight or tomorrow, depending on the text on the other side. It will be posted on our Facebook page. If you have any suggestions for future presentations, email me. If you, what's our Facebook page? If you are interested on updates on what's happening, you can go to our Facebook page. We routinely put things there on, oops, come on. Oh, you're so slow, Jackie, come on. No, that's not my Facebook page. There we go. There we go. We post updatings, and when I know the, when I finally do get some going, you'll get it there. And earlier I posted our homepage for our group of small and backyard flock people, which is here. And it has, we post upcoming, and it also has links to all the past recordings. And I did earlier put the link for the one we did on black soldier flies a few years ago. Since it's not currently working, I will fix that, but in the meantime, that is a direct link that is on our YouTube channel. So if you like our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, you will get whenever we post any new ones. So all that information is there and available for you. Again, thank you everybody for coming. Hopefully we'll see you next month. Everybody have a good Thanksgiving. Talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye-bye.